Welcome to the Stellar Sleep Tales. From the air, the Sahara stretches in every direction like an ocean of pale gold. Dunes rise and fall in slow waves, their crests catching the sun in bands of light and shadow. Between them lie wide plains of gravel and rock, broken here and there by jagged plateaus. The horizon is a thin, trembling line, and the air shimmers with heat. To stand here is to feel as though nothing has ever changed. The desert wears its mask of permanence well. It feels eternal, unshaken by time, a place where the seasons pass unnoticed and the years leave no mark. Yet this stillness is an illusion. Beneath the surface, the Sahara holds memories of a very different self. Hidden in its sands are the remains of rivers that once flowed for hundreds of kilometers, carving channels now dry and silent. In low basins, ancient shorelines curve across the ground like the rings left in a drained vessel. Fossilized fish bones lie where no water has flowed for thousands of years. In caves and on cliff faces, paintings show animals that could not survive here today: hippos wallowing in deep pools, giraffes browsing among trees, elephants moving in heads across grassy plains. These are not myths or symbols, they are records left by people who lived in a Sahara that was green. For thousands of years, this land was alive with water. Lakes as vast as inland seas shimmered under the sun. Rivers fed by distant rains wound their way through grasslands, nourishing forests and wetlands. The air was heavy with the scent of vegetation, and the calls of birds carried across open plains. Herds of antelope grazed alongside domesticated cattle. Crocodiles basked on muddy banks. Fish swam in waters that today are dust and stone. Human communities thrived here, building homes, tending herds, cultivating crops, and fishing in the lakes. They left behind pottery, tools, and art, fragments of daily life preserved in the desert's dry embrace. The transformation from green to barren was not the work of a single catastrophe. It was the result of slow, powerful forces, the cycles of Earth's orbit, and the feedback loops of climate. The planet does not move around the sun in a perfect circle. Its path stretches and tightens over a cycle of about 100,000 years, a change known as eccentricity. The tilt of Earth's axis, called obliquity, shifts between about 22 and 24.5 degrees over 41,000 years, and the planet wobbles like a spinning top in a cycle called precession, which takes about 26,000 years. These Milankovitch cycles alter how much sunlight different parts of the Earth receive at different times of year. A fraction more sunlight in the northern hemisphere's summer can draw the African monsoon northward, bringing rains deep into the Sahara. A fraction less can push the rains south, leaving the desert to advance. When these cycles aligned to strengthen northern summers, the Sahara bloomed. Rain fell regularly, lakes filled, and vegetation spread. Once established, the greenery reinforced itself. Plants shaded the ground, reducing heat and holding moisture in the soil. They released water vapor into the air, encouraging more rainfall. Lakes and wetlands added humidity, feeding storms. This feedback loop kept the landscape stable and fertile, but the balance was fragile. As the orbital cycles shifted, summer sunlight in the north weakened. The monsoon retreated southward. Rains became less frequent. Lakes shrank. Vegetation thinned. With less plant cover, the land reflected more sunlight, heating the air and drying it further. The feedback loop reversed, accelerating the decline. Grasslands gave way to bare soil. Dunes began to march across the land. For the people who lived here, the change was profound. Communities that had fished in great lakes and herded cattle on open plains found their resources dwindling. Some adapted by moving with the shifting environment, following water and pasture. Others migrated toward the Nile Valley, the Sahel, or the Mediterranean coast. They carried their skills, traditions, and memories into new lands, influencing the cultures they joined. The collapse of the Green Sahara was not just an environmental shift, it was a driver of human history. Today, the Sahara's surface gives little hint of this past. The wind sculpts dunes into ridges and crescents, shifting them slowly over years and decades. Sandstorms rise without warning, carrying fine dust high into the atmosphere. That dust travels far, across the Atlantic to the Amazon rainforest, where it delivers phosphorus and other nutrients that help sustain one of the most biodiverse ecosystems on Earth. In this way, the Sahara still gives life, even in its driest state. Its apparent emptiness hides a role in global systems, linking continents through the movement of air and minerals. To walk across the Sahara is to walk on layers of memory. Each grain of sand was once part of a mountain, broken down by wind and water, carried by rivers, and finally dropped here. Each dune has shifted countless times, burying and revealing the traces of earlier worlds. The silence is not the silence of nothingness, but of a story told in a language of stone, sand, and wind. It is a reminder that landscapes are not fixed. They are chapters in a longer narrative, shaped by forces that operate on scales far beyond a human lifetime. The Sahara's present identity as a vast desert is only one mask among many it has worn. It has been a garden, rich with life, and it will be again. The cycles that govern its transformation are still turning. The planet still tilts and wobbles. The monsoon still shifts. In time, thousands of years from now, the rains will return, the lakes will fill, and grass will spread across the dunes. Whether humans will be here to see it is another question, but the desert will change, as it always has. For now, the Sahara waits. Its patience is measured in millennia. It holds the memory of rivers and forests in its sands, the imprint of human hands in its stones, and the promise of renewal in the seeds that lie dormant beneath its surface. It is both destroyer and giver, eternal desert and eternal garden. To see it only as barren is to miss its deeper truth, that change is the only constant, and that even the most forbidding landscapes are part of a living, restless earth. In the heart of the ancient Sahara, vast lakes once shimmered under the sun, their surfaces stretching so far that the opposite shore was lost in haze. These were not small, seasonal pools, but inland seas that transformed the desert into a landscape of abundance. They were the difference between settlement and migration, between a life rooted in one place and a life spent in constant search of water. Around their shores, life gathered in great numbers. Herds of elephants and cattle came to drink. Hippos wallowed in the shallows, their broad backs breaking the surface in slow arcs. Crocodiles slid silently beneath the water, their eyes just above the ripples. Fish thrived in the depths, providing a steady source of food for the people who lived nearby. Birds flocked to these wetlands in such numbers that the air must have been alive with their calls. Many were migratory species, stopping here to rest and feed before continuing their journeys along ancient flyways. The lakes were not just water, they were engines of survival. They sustained entire ecosystems, linking species and habitats across vast distances. For humans, they offered security and abundance. Fish provided protein. Reeds along the shore could be harvested for weaving mats, baskets, and even shelters. Seasonal floods enriched the surrounding soil, making it fertile for crops. Villages and camps sprang up along the water's edge, their people leaving behind pottery, tools, and art that still emerge from the sands in archaeological digs. The scale of these lakes is almost impossible to imagine when standing in the Sahara today. To picture paddling a canoe across ancient Lake Mega Chad or watching the sunrise over the expanse of Lake Meepsy is to imagine a Sahara that feels like another planet. The water would have mirrored the sky, while lush vegetation grew thick along the margins. Herds of animals clustered at the edges, and human families gathered to fish, farm, and share stories by the fire. These were landscapes of plenty, radically different from the sparse, fragile ecosystems that cling to life in the desert now. The lakes shaped the rhythms of human culture. They acted as magnets for settlement, drawing people to their shores. The abundance of resources may have encouraged population growth and the spread of new technologies. Fishing gear became more sophisticated. Pottery for storing food became more common. The earliest experiments with farming took root in this environment of stability. The lakes also served as hubs of movement, bringing different groups into contact and encouraging exchange across regions. Water, after all, is the ultimate meeting point. The presence of these enormous lakes helps explain why the Green Sahara could support so many large animals. Elephants and giraffes require vast amounts of food and water. Hippos need permanent rivers and lakes. Crocodiles can only thrive in stable aquatic environments. Without the steady supply of water from these inland seas, the Sahara could never have hosted such communities. The lakes were not background scenery, they were the foundation of life. Geologists studying the sediments of these vanished water bodies find layers rich in pollen, diatoms, and other microscopic clues. Each core drilled from an ancient lake bed is a time capsule revealing the sequence of wet and dry phases over tens of thousands of years. They show that these lakes expanded and contracted many times, breathing in and out with the rhythms of Earth's orbital cycles. In wetter periods, they swelled into inland seas. In drier phases, they shrank or vanished, leaving behind cracked earth and dust. For the people living at their shores, these changes must have been both opportunity and challenge. In times of plenty, communities could expand and thrive. In leaner years, they may have been forced to move, following rivers or seeking new lands. The memory of abundance was always shadowed by the risk of scarcity. Yet for thousands of years, the balance was generous enough that the Sahara remained a fertile homeland. Today, the modern remnants of these lakes serve as faint reminders of that past. Lake Chad survives, though greatly diminished, and continues to support millions of people. Its waters are a lifeline for farmers, herders, and fishers, just as they were thousands of years ago. But to look at it now and know it was once more than 10 times its current size is to realize how dramatically landscapes can change. The Sahara's lakes are gone, but their legacy lives on in the bones of hippos, in carvings of swimmers, and in the ancient shorelines still etched into desert stone. The story of seas in the desert is one of the most striking reminders that geography is never fixed. The Sahara we know today hides a watery past that shaped ecosystems, animals, and human societies. These vanished lakes remind us that deserts are not eternal. They are landscapes in motion, capable of turning from parched sand to lush abundance and back again. Beneath the dunes are memories of rivers. These were not the modest wadis that briefly run after a rare rainstorm, carving gullies before vanishing into dust. They were mighty waterways flowing for hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers, connecting regions, nourishing grasslands, and feeding vast lakes. Today, ghostly scars on the landscape, winding lines visible from the air, mark their former paths. Perhaps the most famous of these ghost rivers is the Wadi Hoer, often called the Yellow Nile. In its prime, it was no ephemeral trickle, but a great river, a corridor of life stretching across the eastern Sahara. Rising in what is now Chad, it flowed eastward for more than 1,000 kilometers, eventually joining the Nile in Sudan. Its channel would have been lined with grasses, shrubs, and trees, supporting herds of animals and communities of people. Today, its bed is dry, a wide sandy expanse that looks like a highway of stone and dust. From above, however, the pattern is unmistakable. This was once one of the great arteries of Africa's wetter past. The Wadi Hour connected Central Africa's wetter regions to the Nile Valley, serving as a green bridge between ecosystems. Imagine elephants trudging along its banks, giraffes nibbling on trees, or pastoralists moving cattle between waterholes. Fish swam in its waters, crocodiles basked on its shores, and birds flocked along its route. For humans, it was both pathway and pantry, a reliable watercourse that offered food, water, and safe passage. The very idea that the Sahara was once host to such a river feels almost absurd when standing on its desiccated bed today, but the evidence is undeniable. The Sahara's transformation from a green, life-filled landscape into the vast desert we see today was not a single moment of collapse, but a slow, relentless process. It began quietly, almost imperceptibly, as the rains grew less frequent and the lakes began to shrink. At first, the change might have seemed seasonal, a dry year here, a shorter flood there. But over decades, the signs became harder to ignore. Riverbanks that had once been lined with reeds and trees began to crumble into dust. Grasslands thinned, leaving patches of bare earth that spread like stains across the land. As the vegetation retreated, the wind found new freedom. Without roots to hold the soil, the ground loosened, and the first small dunes began to form. They were modest at first, low ridges of sand that shifted with each gust. But the process, once begun, was unstoppable. Grain by grain, the dunes grew taller and wider, advancing across the land like a slow tide. This movement was driven by a process scientists call saltation, the hopping and tumbling of sand grains as the wind lifts them into the air and drops them again, each impact knocking more grains loose. Over centuries, these small movements reshaped entire regions. Hills of sand became mountains. Valleys filled, lakes that had sparkled under the sun were buried beneath shifting blankets of quartz grains. Trees that had shaded giraffes and cattle were uprooted and swallowed. Villages and campsites vanished, their remains entombed in silence until archaeologists uncovered them thousands of years later. The dunes themselves are as varied as snowflakes. Some stretch in long, parallel ridges for hundreds of kilometers, shaped by steady winds from a single direction. Others form star-shaped mounds with arms radiating outward, sculpted by winds that shift with the seasons. Crescent-shaped Barchan dunes advance slowly across the desert like waves rolling toward a shore. The largest, known as star dunes, can rise more than 300 meters, taller than many skyscrapers. From the air, these patterns look almost alive, as though the desert itself is arranging its own geometry under the guiding hand of the wind. In the Sahara, the prevailing trade winds sweep from the northeast, carrying grains across vast distances. Seasonal monsoon winds, which once brought moisture, now often drive sandstorms. These storms can last for hours or even days, blotting out the sun and turning daylight into a dim, reddish twilight. When the winds subside, the sand settles again, sometimes only a few meters from where it began, sometimes many kilometers away. Over time, these accumulations build into dunes that move like glaciers, slow but relentless, reshaping everything in their path. The advance of the dunes is not uniform. Rocky plateaus and gravel plains, known as regs, resist the invasion of sand. These stony deserts are austere but stable, less easily shifted by the wind. Between them, however, lie vast sand seas, or ergs, that define the Sahara in the popular imagination. The Grand Erg Oriental and Grand Erg Occidental in Algeria, the Ubari Sand Sea in Libya, and the Tenere Desert in Niger are only a few examples. Each is a landscape of dunes upon dunes, extending farther than the eye can see. The conquest of sand also altered the desert's climate. As vegetation disappeared and reflective sand spread, the Sahara became hotter and drier. Light-colored dunes bounced more sunlight back into the atmosphere, reducing surface temperatures slightly, but also suppressing convection that might have drawn in clouds. With less moisture recycled from plants, rainfall decreased further. The desert was no longer just a product of dryness, it became an enforcer of it. For the people living on the desert's southern fringe, in the Sahel, the dunes were a constant, creeping threat. Fields, roads, and even buildings could be swallowed over time. Entire communities learned to live with the slow advance, building windbreaks, planting hardy shrubs, and moving when necessary. The same process that had buried the Sahara's green past was still at work in the present. Despite their destructiveness, dunes have a strange beauty. At sunrise, their curves catch the light in bands of gold. At sunset, they glow crimson, their shadows stretching like brushstrokes across the sand. The crests ripple with delicate patterns, like waves frozen in time. On bright nights, when the moon is full, the dunes seem to glow softly, their shapes etched in silver light. For ancient people forced to abandon their homes, the dunes may have been symbols of loss. For travelers and poets since, they have become symbols of eternity, silence, and grandeur. Geologically, much of the Sahara's sand is surprisingly young. It was carried down from mountains by rivers over millions of years, then reworked by the wind. During wetter periods, vegetation pinned the sand in place. But once the climate tipped and grasses died away, the dunes were free to move again. The Sahara we see today, seas of sand stretching across Algeria, Libya, Niger, Mali, and beyond, is the legacy of this release. The dunes also create illusions. From ground level, they can seem eternal, as though they have always been there, yet they are dynamic, restless, and ever moving. Some advance only a few meters each year, while others can move dozens of meters. Archaeologists have found ancient shorelines smothered by dunes so massive that their original shapes are barely discernible. To imagine the dunes' conquest is to picture an army without generals, each grain a soldier moving under orders from the wind. Slowly, silently, they advance, covering lakes, rivers, and savannas. The march is steady, unhurried, but unstoppable. The result is the Sahara as we know it, a landscape that seems eternal, even though it is the outcome of relatively recent change. The dunes whisper their story with every shift and ripple, but their language is patience, measured in centuries rather than days. Beneath the Sahara's surface, invisible to the casual eye, lies a network of ancient rivers and buried channels, ghost waterways that once carried life across what is now an arid expanse. These are not the shallow wadis that briefly awaken after a rare storm. They were mighty rivers, some flowing for hundreds or even thousands of kilometers, linking distant regions and feeding vast lakes. Today, their courses are etched faintly into the desert floor, visible only from the air or revealed by satellite imagery. One of the most remarkable of these is the Wadi Hawar, often called the Yellow Nile. In its prime, it was a green corridor stretching from the highlands of Chad eastward to join the Nile in Sudan. Along its banks grew grasses, shrubs, and trees, providing food and shelter for countless species. Herds of antelope and gazelle grazed in its meadows. Elephants and giraffes wandered its length, stopping to drink from its waters. Crocodiles basked on its sandy shores, while fish swam in its deep pools. For humans, it was both a highway and a pantry, a route for travel and trade, and a source of food, water, and raw materials. The Wadi Howar was not alone. Across the Sahara, similar rivers once flowed, connecting wetter regions in the south to the Mediterranean coast. Some carried seasonal floods, while others ran year-round, fed by distant rains and underground springs. These waterways shaped migration routes for both animals and people. They were arteries of life, sustaining communities and linking ecosystems that today seem impossibly far apart. Geological evidence tells the story of their rise and fall. Sediment cores taken from ancient riverbeds reveal layers of sand, silt, and clay deposited over thousands of years. In wetter periods, the layers are rich in organic material, pollen from savanna grasses, fragments of freshwater shells, traces of plant roots. In drier times, the layers thin and become coarser, marking the retreat of water and the advance of desert conditions. These records show that the Sahara's rivers were not permanent fixtures. They pulsed with the rhythms of Earth's climate cycles, swelling during humid phases and vanishing during arid ones. The disappearance of these rivers was gradual but relentless. As the African humid period came to an end, rainfall patterns shifted. The monsoon retreated southward, and the flow of water diminished. Channels that had once been wide and deep became shallow and intermittent. Vegetation along the banks withered. Without plant roots to hold the soil, erosion increased, and the wind began to claim the exposed ground. Over centuries, the rivers dried completely, leaving behind winding depressions that the desert slowly filled with sand. For the people who lived along these waterways, the change was profound. Settlements that had thrived for generations found themselves without reliable water. Fishing became impossible. Farming failed as irrigation sources dried up. Communities faced a choice: adapt to a harsher, drier environment, or move in search of better conditions. Many chose to migrate, carrying their skills, traditions, and stories to new lands. Some moved toward the Nile Valley, contributing to the growth of early civilizations there. Others traveled south into the Sahel, where seasonal rains still supported herding and farming. Even in their absence, the rivers left a legacy. The routes they carved became natural pathways for movement across the desert. Traders in later centuries followed these same corridors, guiding caravans of camels laden with salt, gold, ivory, and other goods. The memory of water lingered in place names, in oral traditions, and in the location of oases that still tap into the remnants of ancient aquifers. Modern technology has brought these hidden rivers back into view. Satellite radar can penetrate the sand to reveal the shapes of buried channels. In some cases, these images show networks of tributaries converging into broad main stems, just as they would in a living river system. Such discoveries have reshaped our understanding of the Sahara's past, confirming that it was once a landscape of flowing water and fertile valleys. These findings also have practical implications. Beneath parts of the Sahara lie vast reserves of fossil water, ancient groundwater stored in aquifers that were recharged during wetter periods thousands of years ago. In places like Libya, Egypt, and Chad, wells tap into these reserves to supply towns and irrigate crops. While this water is finite and must be managed carefully, it is a reminder that the desert's apparent emptiness hides resources shaped by its greener past. The story of the Sahara's rivers is also a story of connection. Waterways linked distant regions, allowing plants, animals, and people to move and interact. Genetic studies of African wildlife show patterns that can be explained by these ancient corridors, populations of fish, for example, that are now separated by hundreds of kilometers of desert but share a common ancestry from when rivers joined their habitats. Human cultures, too, bear the marks of these connections in shared technologies, artistic styles, and languages that spread along the river roads. Walking along the dry bed of an ancient river today, it is hard to imagine the scene as it once was. The channel may be wide and flat, lined with low dunes or rocky outcrops. The sand underfoot is fine and loose, shifting with each step. Yet the shape of the land tells its story. The gentle slope of the banks, the meanders that curve like frozen waves, the occasional outcrop of rounded stones smoothed by water long gone. In some places, you might find the remains of fish bones or freshwater shells, tangible proof that this was once a place of abundance. The ghost rivers of the Sahara remind us that landscapes are not fixed. They change with the climate, with the tilt of the earth, with the patterns of wind and rain. What is dry today may be wet tomorrow, and what is fertile may one day turn to dust. These shifts can happen slowly, over thousands of years, or more quickly, within the span of human memory. In the grand cycles of the planet, the Sahara's rivers will return. When the orbital rhythms align again to draw the monsoon northward, rain will fall on the desert, and water will once more carve its way through the sand. Valleys will green, lakes will fill, and life will follow the water's path. Whether humans will be here to witness it is uncertain, but the rivers will come back, as they always have, carrying with them the promise of renewal. Every year, the Sahara releases an invisible river into the sky, not of water, but of dust. Fine particles, smaller than grains of sand, are lifted by the wind and carried across oceans. From space, these plumes appear as vast, hazy veils stretching westward over the Atlantic. They are so large that satellites can track their movement for thousands of kilometers, from the desert's heart to the shores of South America and the Caribbean. This dust is more than a byproduct of dryness. It is a courier of nutrients, a link between ecosystems separated by entire oceans. Scientists have measured its composition and found it rich in phosphorus, iron, and other minerals. These are the building blocks of life, essential for plants and microorganisms. In the Amazon rainforest, where heavy rains wash nutrients from the soil, the arrival of Saharan dust is a lifeline. Each year, millions of tons settle over the forest, replenishing what the rains take away. Without this input, the Amazon's lush canopy might not be able to sustain itself at the scale we know today. The journey begins when strong winds sweep across the Sahara's surface, lifting dust from dry lake beds and ancient sediments. One of the most important sources is the Baudelaire Depression in Chad, a low-lying basin that was once the floor of a massive lake. The sediments here are rich in diatom shells, the remains of microscopic algae that lived in the lake's waters thousands of years ago. These shells are composed of silica and other minerals, making the dust from this region particularly nutrient dense. Once airborne, the dust can travel for days or even weeks. It rides the trade winds westward, crossing the Atlantic in a broad arc. Along the way, some of it falls into the ocean, where it feeds phytoplankton, the microscopic plants that form the base of the marine food web. Phytoplankton blooms can be seen from space as swirls of green in the blue water, a sign of life sparked by particles from a desert half a world away. The rest of the dust continues on to the Americas. In the Caribbean, it settles on islands, enriching soils and influencing local ecosystems. In the southeastern United States, traces of Saharan dust have been found in rainwater and on rooftops. The scale of this transport is staggering. Estimates suggest that the Sahara sends more than 180 million tons of dust across the Atlantic each year. This movement of dust is not a modern phenomenon. It has been happening for as long as the Sahara has been dry enough to produce it. In fact, the very nutrients that now feed the Amazon may have originated in the Sahara's greener past, when lakes and rivers deposited sediments that later dried and turned to dust. In this way, the desert's history is written into the life of distant forests. The dust also affects weather and climate. In the atmosphere, it can reflect sunlight, slightly cooling the surface below. It can also absorb heat, influencing the formation of clouds and the development of storms. Some studies suggest that Saharan dust can suppress hurricane formation in the Atlantic by stabilizing the atmosphere and reducing the amount of moisture available for storms to grow. Others note that it can seed clouds, potentially increasing rainfall in certain regions. The exact effects depend on the size of the particles, their composition, and the conditions they encounter along their journey. For people living in the path of these dust plumes, the experience is tangible. In West Africa, the Harmattan winds carry dust that can turn the sky a milky white and coat every surface in a fine layer. In the Caribbean, a hazy summer day may be the result of dust from thousands of kilometers away. While the nutrients are beneficial to ecosystems, the dust can also pose health risks, especially for those with respiratory conditions. Understanding and predicting these events is an important feat of meteorology in affected regions. The story of Saharan dust is a story of connection. It shows that no place on Earth is truly isolated. A change in one region, the drying of a lake, the erosion of a plain, can have consequences half a world away. It also challenges our perception of deserts as barren wastelands. Even in their driest state, they are active participants in the planet's cycles, moving matter and energy across vast distances. Scientists studying this phenomenon use a combination of satellite data, ground measurements, and computer models. Satellites track the movement of dust plumes in real time, while ground stations collect samples to analyze their composition. Oceanographers measure the response of phytoplankton blooms to dust deposition, and ecologists study how nutrient inputs affect forest growth. Together, these efforts build a picture of the Sahara not as an isolated desert, but as a global player in the exchange of life's raw materials. The Baudelaire Depression, in particular, has become a focal point for research. Its unique geography funnels winds through a narrow gap between mountains, accelerating them to speeds capable of lifting massive amounts of dust. This natural wind tunnel operates with remarkable consistency, making the Baudelaire one of the most prolific dust sources on the planet. The sediments it releases are the remnants of a lake that existed during the African humid period when the Sahara was green. In this way, the dust is a direct link between the Sahara's past and the ecosystems it nourishes today. Looking ahead, climate change may alter the patterns of dust transport. Changes in wind strength, rainfall, and vegetation cover could increase or decrease the amount of dust leaving the Sahara. An increase might mean more nutrients for the Amazon and the Atlantic, but also more haze and potential health impacts for people. A decrease could reduce nutrient inputs to distant ecosystems, with consequences that are difficult to predict. What is certain is that the Sahara's dust will continue to be a vital thread in the fabric of Earth's interconnected systems. It is a reminder that even the smallest particles can have far reaching effects, and that the boundaries we draw on maps are meaningless to the forces that shape our planet. The desert's silence is deceptive. In truth, it is speaking constantly, sending whispers across the sea in the language of dust. There was a time, not so long ago in geological terms, when the Sahara was not a desert at all. Between roughly 14,500 and 5,000 years ago, the region experienced what scientists call the African humid period, an era when the climate shifted dramatically and the world's largest hot desert became a patchwork of grasslands, lakes, and rivers. This transformation was driven by subtle changes in Earth's orbit, which altered the distribution of sunlight and strengthened the African monsoon. During this period, summer sunlight in the northern hemisphere increased just enough to pull the monsoon rains hundreds of kilometers farther north than they reach today. The result was a Sahara alive with water. Seasonal rains filled basins, creating lakes so vast they rivaled inland seas. Rivers flowed across what is now barren sand, linking ecosystems and sustaining life on a scale that is hard to imagine from the modern landscape. The vegetation responded quickly. Grasses spread across the plains, anchoring the soil and holding moisture in the ground. Acacia trees dotted the horizon, their canopies providing shade for animals and people alike. Wetlands formed along riverbanks, attracting birds in great numbers. The air would have been filled with the calls of cranes, storks, and ducks, many of them migratory species stopping to rest and feed before continuing their journeys. Large mammals thrived in this environment. Herds of antelope grazed in the open grasslands. Elephants moved in family groups, following ancient paths to water holes. Giraffes browsed on the leaves of tall trees. Hippos wallowed in lakes and rivers, their grunts echoing across the water. Crocodiles basked on muddy banks, slipping silently into the water at the first sign of movement. This was a landscape of abundance, where life flourished in every direction. Humans were part of this thriving ecosystem. Archaeological evidence shows that people lived throughout the Sahara during the African humid period, taking advantage of its rich resources. They fished in the lakes, hunted game in the grasslands, and gathered plants for food and medicine. Over time, they began to domesticate animals, particularly cattle, marking the transition from hunting and gathering to pastoralism. This shift allowed communities to settle more permanently, building villages near reliable water sources. The cultural legacy of this time is preserved in the Sahara's rock art. Paintings and carvings from the African humid period depict scenes of daily life: herders tending cattle, families gathered around fires, hunters with bows and arrows, and swimmers moving through open water. These images are vivid reminders that the Sahara was once a place of connection and creativity, not isolation. The African humid period was not a static era. Rainfall varied from year to year, and there were still dry spells. But overall, the climate was stable enough to support complex ecosystems and human societies for thousands of years. The balance was maintained by feedback loops between vegetation, soil, and atmosphere. Plants helped retain moisture and encouraged rainfall, which in turn supported more plant growth. Lakes and wetlands added humidity to the air, feeding the monsoon system. Eventually, however, the orbital cycles shifted again. Summer sunlight in the north began to weaken, and the monsoon retreated southward. The change was gradual at first, but its effects accumulated. Rainfall decreased, lakes began to shrink, grasslands thinned, and bare patches of soil appeared. Without vegetation to hold it in place, the soil was carried away by wind and water. The feedback loops that had sustained the Green Sahara now worked in reverse, accelerating the drying process. For the people living in the Sahara, this transition was a challenge. Communities that had relied on fishing found their lakes disappearing. Pastoralists had to move their herds more frequently in search of pasture. Some groups adapted by becoming more mobile, while others migrated to regions with more reliable water. The Nile Valley, with its dependable floods, became a major destination, and the influx of people may have contributed to the rise of early Egyptian civilization. By around 5,000 years ago, the transformation was complete. The Sahara had returned to its arid state, and the African humid period was over. The lakes dried to salt flats, the rivers vanished into sand, and the grasslands gave way to dunes. The animals that had once roamed freely either moved to wetter regions or disappeared from the area entirely. Human populations shifted southward or clustered around the few remaining oases. Yet the memory of the Green Sahara lives on, not only in the rock art and archaeological sites, but in the very dust that now blows from its surface. The sediments that feed the Amazon rainforest today are the remnants of those ancient lakes and rivers, ground down over millennia and carried across the ocean by the wind. In this way, the African humid period continues to shape life far beyond the desert's borders. Scientists study this era to understand how small changes in Earth's orbit can lead to dramatic shifts in climate. The African humid period is a clear example of how feedback loops can amplify these changes, turning a dry desert into a fertile landscape and back again. It also offers a glimpse into the future. If the orbital cycles align again in the right way, the Sahara could become green once more, though such a change would take thousands of years. The lessons of the African humid period are both hopeful and cautionary. They show that landscapes can recover, that deserts can bloom, and that life can adapt to new conditions. But they also remind us that these transformations can be swift and irreversible on human timescales. The people who lived through the end of the Green Sahara had to adapt quickly, moving, innovating, and finding new ways to survive. Today, as we face our own climate challenges, the story of the African humid period is a reminder that change is inevitable, but the way we respond to it is within our control. The Sahara's past tells us that even the most extreme environments are not fixed, and that resilience in ecosystems and in human societies is the key to enduring those changes. In the quiet of the modern desert, it is hard to imagine the Sahara as it once was. But if you stand on a rocky plateau and look out over the dunes, you might picture the grasslands stretching to the horizon, the lakes glinting in the sun, and the herds moving slowly across the plains. You might hear the distant calls of birds and the lowing of cattle, carried on a breeze that smells of rain. For a moment, the African humid period comes alive again, a reminder that the desert's story is one of cycles, and that every dry season is only one chapter in a much longer tale.
The Sahara is often imagined as a barrier, a vast, empty expanse separating the Mediterranean world from sub-Saharan Africa. But in truth it has also been a bridge. Its cycles of greening and drying have not only transformed its own landscapes but have rippled outward, influencing the rise and fall of civilizations far beyond its borders. When the Sahara was green, its lakes, rivers, and grasslands supported thriving human communities. People fished, farmed, herded animals, and traded goods across the region. These networks of exchange connected distant groups, allowing ideas, technologies, and cultural practices to spread. The abundance of resources meant that populations could grow, and with growth came innovation. Tools became more specialized. Pottery designs became more intricate. Social structures became more complex. As the climate shifted and the Sahara began to dry, these same communities faced a choice: adapt in place or move. Many chose to migrate, carrying their skills and traditions with them. One of the most significant destinations for these migrating peoples was the Nile Valley. Here, the dependable annual floods of the Nile provided fertile soil for farming, even as the surrounding desert grew harsher. Archaeologists believe that some of the early agricultural practices and livestock management techniques in ancient Egypt may have been brought by people displaced from the Sahara's interior. This movement of people did more than just increase the population along the Nile. It may have contributed to the cultural and technological foundations of one of the world's most enduring civilizations. The knowledge of animal husbandry, irrigation, and seasonal cycles, honed in the Green Sahara, would have been invaluable in the Nile Valley. The blending of traditions from different regions could have enriched religious beliefs, artistic styles, and political organization. The Sahara's influence was not limited to Egypt. To the west, as the desert expanded, people moved toward the Atlantic coast and into the Sahel, the semi-arid belt south of the Sahara. Here they adapted their skills to new environments, developing farming systems suited to seasonal rains and dry spells. Over time, these communities would give rise to powerful kingdoms and trading empires, such as Ghana, Mali, and Songhai, which controlled the flow of gold, salt, and other goods across the desert. Trade across the Sahara became one of the most important economic systems in the pre-modern world. Caravans of camels, sometimes numbering in the thousands, carried salt from the desert's mines to the cities of the Sahel, and returned with gold, ivory, and slaves. These routes linked West Africa to North Africa and the Mediterranean, and through them to Europe and the Middle East. Ideas traveled along with goods. Religious beliefs, architectural styles, and scientific knowledge all moved across the desert. Even in its driest state, the Sahara was not an empty void. Oases, fed by underground aquifers, provided rest stops for caravans and supported small but vibrant communities. Towns like Timbuktu and Gao became centers of learning as well as trade, their libraries filled with manuscripts on subjects ranging from astronomy to medicine. The desert, far from being a dead zone, was a conduit for the exchange of knowledge and culture. The cycles of the Sahara also played a role in shaping political boundaries and military strategies. In times of greening, the desert's interior could be crossed more easily, allowing for greater interaction between regions. In times of drying, the desert became a formidable barrier, protecting some areas from invasion while isolating others. Rulers and generals had to account for these shifts, adapting their plans to the changing landscape. The Sahara's dust, carried across continents, may even have had indirect effects on civilizations far from its borders. By fertilizing the Amazon rainforest and enriching soils in the Caribbean, it contributed to the productivity of ecosystems that would one day support large human populations. The interconnectedness of these systems is a reminder that environmental changes in one region can have far-reaching consequences. In the modern era, the Sahara continues to shape human activity. Its mineral resources, from salt to oil, are still extracted and traded. Its winds influence weather patterns across the Atlantic, affecting agriculture in the Americas. Its vast solar potential has inspired projects to harness its sunlight for renewable energy, with the possibility of supplying power to both Africa and Europe. The history of the Sahara's influence on civilizations is a story of adaptation and resilience. People have learned to live with its cycles, to use its resources when they are abundant, and to move or innovate when they are scarce. This adaptability is a testament to human ingenuity, but it is also a reminder of our dependence on the natural world. The lessons of the Sahara are especially relevant today, as we face global environmental changes. Just as ancient peoples had to respond to shifting climates, we too must find ways to adapt to new realities. The Sahara's past shows that change is inevitable, but it also shows that change can lead to new opportunities. Civilizations can rise from the challenges posed by the environment, just as they can fall when those challenges are ignored. Standing at the edge of the desert, looking out over the dunes, it is easy to see only the present, the heat, the dryness, the emptiness. But beneath the surface lies a history of abundance, movement, and connection. The sand covers the traces of ancient lakes and rivers, but it also covers the footprints of traders, herders, and farmers who once called this place home. The wind erases their paths, but their influence lives on in the cultures and societies that grew from their journeys. The Sahara is not just a desert. It is a force that has shaped the course of human history, a stage on which countless dramas of survival, adaptation, and exchange have played out. Its cycles of greening and drying are not just natural phenomena, they are engines of change that have driven the movement of people, the spread of ideas, and the rise of civilizations. In the end, the Sahara's role in shaping civilizations is a reminder that the environment is not a backdrop to human history, it is an active participant. The desert has given and taken, connected and divided, nurtured and challenged. And as its cycles continue, it will go on shaping the world in ways we can only begin to imagine. The Sahara story is written not only in its sands and stones but in the slow, predictable rhythms of the planet itself. Over millions of years, this vast region has shifted between extremes, from lush grasslands to arid desert, in response to changes in Earth's orbit and the delicate feedback loops of climate. These shifts are not random. They follow patterns that scientists have come to understand through decades of research, patterns that reveal the Sahara as a landscape in constant motion. At the heart of these changes are the Milankovitch cycles, three overlapping variations in Earth's movement that alter how sunlight is distributed across the planet. The first is eccentricity, the shape of Earth's orbit around the Sun. Over a cycle of about 100,000 years, the orbit shifts from being nearly circular to slightly more elliptical and back again. This change affects the distance between Earth and the Sun during different times of the year, subtly influencing the intensity of the seasons. The second cycle is obliquity, the tilt of Earth's axis. Over roughly 41,000 years, the tilt shifts between about 22 and 24.5 degrees. A greater tilt means more extreme seasons, hotter summers and colder winters, especially at higher latitudes. A smaller tilt produces milder seasons. For the Sahara, the tilt affects how far north the African monsoon can reach during the summer months. The third cycle is precession, a slow wobble in Earth's rotation that takes about 26,000 years to complete. This wobble changes the timing of the seasons relative to Earth's position in its orbit. When the northern hemisphere's summer occurs at the point in the orbit closest to the Sun, summers are warmer and the monsoon is stronger. When summer occurs farther from the Sun, the monsoon weakens. These three cycles interact in complex ways, sometimes reinforcing each other, sometimes canceling each other out. When they align to produce stronger northern hemisphere summers, the African monsoon shifts northward, bringing rain deep into the Sahara. Lakes fill, rivers flow, and vegetation spreads. When they align in the opposite way, the monsoon retreats, rainfall decreases, and the desert expands. The Sahara's greening during the African humid period was one such alignment. Increased summer sunlight in the north strengthened the monsoon, drawing moisture far into the desert. But as the cycles shifted, the balance tipped. The monsoon weakened, and the Sahara began its slow return to aridity. This was not a sudden collapse but a gradual transformation, unfolding over centuries. Feedback loops played a crucial role in this process. Vegetation, once established, helps to maintain rainfall by releasing moisture into the air and shading the ground. As plants die back, the land reflects more sunlight, heating the air and reducing the likelihood of rain. This positive feedback accelerates drying. Similarly, lakes and wetlands add humidity to the atmosphere, encouraging cloud formation. When they shrink, the air becomes drier and rainfall decreases further. The interplay between orbital cycles and feedback loops means that the Sahara's climate is highly sensitive to small changes. A slight shift in the timing of the seasons or the tilt of the axis can set in motion a chain of events that transforms the landscape over thousands of years. This sensitivity also means that the Sahara's future is not fixed. Given the right conditions, it could become green again. Evidence for these cycles comes from multiple sources. Sediment cores from ancient lake beds reveal alternating layers of organic-rich mud and wind-blown dust, marking wet and dry periods. Pollen grains preserved in these sediments tell us what kinds of plants grew in the region at different times. Marine sediments off the coast of West Africa contain dust blown from the Sahara, with thicker layers corresponding to drier periods. Even ice cores from Greenland and Antarctica record changes in atmospheric dust and greenhouse gases linked to the Sahara's shifts. These records show that the Sahara has undergone dozens of wet-dry cycles over the past few million years. Each cycle is unique in its timing and intensity, but the overall pattern is clear. The desert is not permanent. It is one phase in a repeating sequence driven by the mechanics of the solar system. For humans, these cycles have been both opportunity and challenge. Wet phases opened vast areas to settlement, providing water, fertile soil, and abundant wildlife. Dry phases forced migration, innovation, and adaptation. The movement of people in response to these changes has shaped cultures, economies, and histories across Africa and beyond. Today, the Sahara is in a dry phase, but the cycles continue to turn. In tens of thousands of years, the orbital configuration will once again favor stronger northern hemisphere summers, and the monsoon will push northward. Rain will return to the desert, lakes will form, and vegetation will spread. The transformation will be slow by human standards but swift in geological terms. Understanding these cycles is more than an academic exercise. It provides context for the changes we see today and helps us distinguish between natural variability and human-driven climate change. While the Sahara's long-term rhythms are set by orbital mechanics, human activities can influence the pace and nature of its transformations. Land use, greenhouse gas emissions, and regional climate patterns all interact with the underlying cycles. The Sahara's climate history also offers a cautionary tale. The feedback loops that amplify natural changes can also amplify human-induced ones. Just as the loss of vegetation in the past accelerated drying, deforestation, and land degradation today can intensify desertification. Conversely, efforts to restore vegetation and manage water resources can help stabilize local climates, even in the face of broader trends. In the stillness of the modern Sahara, it is easy to forget that this landscape is part of a dynamic system. The dunes, the rocky plateaus, the dry riverbeds, all are temporary expressions of a deeper rhythm. The desert's apparent permanence is an illusion, a snapshot in a long sequence of transformations. To walk here is to walk through time. Each grain of sand has been part of mountains, rivers, and seas. Each layer of sediment tells a story of rain and drought, of abundance and scarcity. The wind that shapes the dunes today is the same wind that once carried moisture-laden clouds deep into the interior. The cycles continue, indifferent to human timelines, yet profoundly influential on human lives. The Sahara's rhythms remind us that change is the rule, not the exception. Landscapes evolve, climates shift, and life adapts. The challenge for us is to understand these patterns and to find our place within them, to live not as if the world is fixed, but as if it is always becoming something new. The Sahara of today is a place of extremes. Temperatures can soar above 50 degrees Celsius in the hottest months, and in some areas years can pass without measurable rainfall. Yet despite these harsh conditions, life persists. Plants, animals, and people have all found ways to adapt to the desert's challenges, each developing strategies to endure in a land where water is scarce and the environment is unforgiving. For plants, survival begins with conserving moisture. Many desert species have small, tough leaves or spines that reduce water loss. Some, like the acacia tree, send roots deep into the ground to tap hidden reserves. Others, such as certain grasses, grow quickly after rare rains, producing seeds that can lie dormant for years until the next opportunity to germinate. These adaptations allow vegetation to take advantage of brief windows of abundance, then retreat into dormancy during long dry spells. Animals, too, have evolved remarkable strategies. The fennec fox, with its oversized ears, radiates heat away from its body and can survive long periods without direct water, obtaining moisture from its food. Camels, often called the ships of the desert, can drink large amounts of water when available and store fat in their humps as an energy reserve. Many reptiles and insects are nocturnal, avoiding the heat of the day and emerging at night when temperatures drop. Migratory birds time their journeys to coincide with seasonal rains, using temporary wetlands as stopovers. For humans, survival in the Sahara has always depended on mobility, knowledge, and cooperation. Nomadic groups such as the Tuareg and Bedouin have developed lifestyles that allow them to move with the seasons, following grazing for their animals and water sources for themselves. Their knowledge of the land, where to find hidden wells, how to navigate by stars, how to read the wind and sand, is passed down through generations. This knowledge is as vital as any physical resource. Oases are the lifelines of the modern Sahara. Fed by underground aquifers, they provide water for drinking, irrigation, and livestock. Around these green islands, date palms, figs, and other crops are cultivated, creating pockets of fertility in an otherwise barren landscape. The management of these resources is often communal, with strict rules to ensure that water is shared fairly and used efficiently. In some places, ancient irrigation systems known as fagaras or canets still channel water from distant sources to sustain agriculture. Trade remains an important part of life in the Sahara, though it has changed with time. In the past, camel caravans carried salt, gold, and other goods across the desert. Today, trucks and roads have replaced many of these routes, but the exchange of goods and ideas continues. Markets in desert towns are vibrant with textiles, spices, and crafts, blending traditional and modern influences. Tourism has also become a source of income for some communities. Visitors come to experience the vastness of the dunes, the clarity of the night sky, and the cultural heritage of the desert's people. Guided treks, camel rides, and stays in traditional tents offer glimpses into a way of life shaped by the environment. However, tourism must be managed carefully to avoid damaging fragile ecosystems and disrupting local traditions. Modern technology has brought new tools for survival. Solar panels provide electricity in remote areas, powering lights, pumps, and communication devices. Mobile phones and satellite connections link even isolated communities to the wider world, enabling trade, education, and access to emergency services. In some regions, projects are underway to harness the Sahara's abundant sunlight for large-scale renewable energy production, with the potential to supply power far beyond the desert's borders. Yet challenges remain. Climate change threatens to alter rainfall patterns and increase the frequency of extreme heat events. Overgrazing, deforestation, and unsustainable water use can degrade the land, making it more vulnerable to erosion and desertification. Political instability in some areas adds to the difficulties, disrupting trade and displacing communities. Efforts to address these challenges often combine traditional knowledge with modern science. Reforestation projects aim to stabilize soil and create windbreaks. The Great Green Wall Initiative, for example, seeks to restore degraded land across the Sahel by planting trees and supporting sustainable agriculture. Water management programs focus on improving irrigation efficiency and protecting aquifers from overuse. Education and training help communities adapt to changing conditions, ensuring that younger generations have the skills they need to thrive. The resilience of the Sahara's people is rooted in their ability to adapt. This adaptability is not just about physical survival, it is also cultural. Music, poetry, and storytelling remain central to community life, preserving history and identity even as circumstances change. Festivals celebrate the rhythms of the seasons, the movement of caravans, and the bonds between families and tribes. These traditions provide continuity and meaning in a landscape that is always shifting. In the stillness of the desert, it is easy to think of it as empty. But to those who know it, the Sahara is full of signs: the tracks of animals in the sand, the shape of a dune that reveals the direction of the wind, the color of the sky that hints at a coming storm. Every detail carries information, and survival depends on reading it correctly. This attentiveness to the environment is a form of wisdom, one that has been honed over centuries and remains as relevant today as ever. The modern Sahara is a place where ancient and contemporary coexist. Satellite images map the same landscapes that nomads navigate by memory. Solar panels stand beside camel corrals. Plastic water containers are filled from wells dug generations ago. The tools may change, but the principles, mobility, resourcefulness, cooperation, remain constant. Looking to the future, the Sahara will continue to test the ingenuity of those who live within it. New challenges will arise, but so will new opportunities. The desert's vast open spaces, abundant sunlight, and unique cultural heritage offer potential for sustainable development that respects both the environment and the people who call it home. The story of survival in the modern Sahara is not one of isolation but of connection, to the land, to each other, and to the wider world. It is a reminder that even in the harshest environments, life finds a way, adapting and enduring through a combination of knowledge, innovation, and community. The desert may be vast and unforgiving, but it is also a place of resilience, where every grain of sand carries the memory of change and the promise of renewal. Beneath the endless dunes of the Sahara lies a secret world few ever see. While the surface appears dry and lifeless, vast reserves of ancient water are stored deep underground. These hidden aquifers, some formed thousands of years ago during wetter climatic periods, are the lifeblood of many desert communities. Without them, permanent settlement in much of the Sahara would be impossible. The largest of these reserves is the Nubian sandstone aquifer system, stretching beneath parts of Libya, Egypt, Sudan, and Chad. It contains an estimated 150,000 cubic kilometers of water, enough to fill the Nile River for centuries. Yet this water is not easily replenished. In many areas it is considered fossil water, trapped since prehistoric times. Extracting it requires deep drilling, advanced pumping systems, and careful management to avoid depletion. In Libya, the Great Man-Made River project was built to tap these underground reserves. Massive pipelines carry water from deep wells in the desert to coastal cities, supplying millions of people. While the project has transformed agriculture and urban life, it has also raised concerns about sustainability. Drawing too much water too quickly can lower the water table, making it harder and more expensive to access in the future. Smaller-scale systems have existed for centuries. In parts of Algeria and Morocco, traditional fagaras and kataras channel water from underground sources to fields and villages. These gently sloping tunnels use gravity to move water without pumps, minimizing evaporation and energy use. Maintaining them requires constant labor, as sand can block the channels and collapse can occur. Communities often share responsibility for upkeep, with strict rules governing water distribution. The presence of underground water shapes settlement patterns. Towns and villages often cluster around reliable wells, forming green oases in the midst of barren terrain. Date palms dominate these landscapes, their deep roots drawing moisture from below while providing shade for crops like barley, wheat, and vegetables. The layered planting system, tall palms above, fruit trees in the middle, and ground crops below, maximizes productivity and conserves water. For nomadic groups, knowledge of hidden water sources is a matter of survival. Oral traditions preserve the locations of wells, springs, and seasonal waterholes. Some are marked by distinctive rock formations or ancient stone cairns. In times of drought, These sources can mean the difference between life and death for both people and livestock. Modern mapping technologies have revealed just how extensive these underground networks are. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar can detect moisture beneath the surface, guiding drilling efforts. This has opened new possibilities for agriculture and settlement, but also new risks. Without careful regulation, over-extraction could exhaust reserves that took millennia to accumulate. Climate change adds another layer of complexity. Rising temperatures increase evaporation rates, while shifting rainfall patterns may reduce the recharge of shallower aquifers. In some areas, flash floods can briefly replenish underground stores, but these events are unpredictable and often destructive. Managing water in the Sahara now requires balancing immediate needs with long-term sustainability. Water scarcity has also influenced the region's history. Control over wells and oases has been a source of power and conflict for centuries. Caravans depended on these points for survival, and rival groups sometimes fought for access. Even today, disputes over water rights can strain relations between communities, especially where resources are limited. International cooperation is essential for managing shared aquifers. The Nubian sandstone aquifer, for example, spans 4 countries, making joint agreements necessary to prevent overuse. Organizations and treaties aim to promote data sharing, coordinated monitoring, and equitable distribution. Success depends on trust, transparency, and the recognition that water security is tied to regional stability. In addition to human needs, underground water supports unique ecosystems. In some places, natural springs feed wetlands that provide habitat for migratory birds, fish, and other wildlife. These pockets of biodiversity are fragile. Changes in water flow can quickly disrupt them. Conservation efforts often focus on protecting these habitats alongside human water use. Technological innovation offers hope for more efficient water management. Solar-powered pumps reduce reliance on fossil fuels, while drip irrigation delivers water directly to plant roots, minimizing waste. Desalination plants along the coast can supplement freshwater supplies, reducing pressure on inland aquifers. However, these solutions require investment, infrastructure, and training to implement effectively. Cultural attitudes toward water in the Sahara reflect its value. In many communities, offering a drink to a traveler is a deeply ingrained act of hospitality. Water is treated with reverence and waste is frowned upon. Festivals and rituals sometimes mark the cleaning of wells or the first flow of water through irrigation channels, reinforcing the connection between people and their most vital resource. The story of the Sahara's hidden rivers is also a story of resilience. Generations have learned to live within the limits of what the land can provide, adapting to scarcity with ingenuity and cooperation. As pressures mount from population growth, climate change, and economic development, these lessons are more relevant than ever. Looking ahead, the challenge will be to integrate traditional knowledge with modern science. Local expertise can guide sustainable practices, while technology can improve efficiency and monitoring. Education will play a key role, ensuring that future generations understand both the value of water and the consequences of mismanagement. The hidden rivers beneath the Sahara are a reminder that even in the most inhospitable places, life depends on unseen connections. They link past and present, sustaining cultures that have endured for centuries. Protecting them is not just a matter of survival for those who live in the desert. It is a responsibility shared by all who recognize the importance of preserving the planet's most precious resource. In the silence of the dunes, the presence of water is felt rather than seen. It shapes the rhythm of life, the placement of settlements, and the flow of history. To walk across the Sahara is to move through a landscape defined as much by what lies beneath as by what meets the eye. The challenge, and the opportunity, is to ensure that these hidden rivers continue to flow for generations to come. The Sahara's dunes are not fixed monuments. They are restless, sculpted by the wind into ever-changing forms. From a distance, they may appear still, but each grain of sand is part of a slow, constant migration. Understanding how dunes move is not only a matter of scientific curiosity, it is essential for navigation, settlement planning, and the preservation of infrastructure in desert regions. Dunes form when wind carries loose sand until it encounters an obstacle, a rock, a plant, or even a slight rise in the ground. The sand piles up, and as more grains accumulate, the mound grows. Over time, the wind shapes it into a recognizable form. The most common types in the Sahara are Barkhan dunes, crescent-shaped with horns pointing downwind, and linear dunes, which can stretch for hundreds of kilometers. Star dunes, with multiple arms radiating from a central peak, form where winds blow from several directions. The movement of dunes depends on wind strength, direction, and the size of the sand grains. Fine, dry sand moves more easily than coarse or compacted grains. In strong winds, sand can travel in short hops, a process called saltation, or be lifted into the air as dust. Over time, this movement can shift entire dunes by several meters each year. In some regions, dunes have been recorded advancing toward roads, villages, and farmland, burying them under tons of sand. Scientists study dune migration using satellite imagery, aerial photography, and ground surveys. By comparing images taken years apart, they can track changes in shape and position. This data helps predict future movement and identify areas at risk. In some cases, barriers such as fences or rows of vegetation are planted to slow the advance of sand. These measures can be effective locally, but large-scale dune movement is difficult to stop entirely. The interaction between dunes and wind is a dynamic feedback loop. As dunes move, they alter wind patterns which in turn reshape the dunes. This constant reshaping creates patterns visible from space, sweeping lines, curves, and ripples that resemble the surface of a vast ocean frozen in time. For scientists, these patterns are clues to the history of wind in the region, revealing shifts in climate over thousands of years. Dunes also play a role in the desert's ecology. The sheltered areas between dunes, known as interdune zones, can trap moisture and support vegetation. These pockets of life provide food and shelter for insects, reptiles, and small mammals. In some cases, they serve as stopover points for migratory birds. The presence of vegetation can, in turn, stabilize the sand, slowing dune movement and creating microhabitats in an otherwise harsh environment. For people living in the Sahara, dunes are both a challenge and a resource. Navigating through dune fields requires skill and experience. The shape and orientation of dunes can indicate prevailing wind directions, helping travelers maintain their bearings. In some traditions, the patterns of ripples on the sand are read like a map, revealing recent weather and the passage of animals or people. In modern times, dune movement poses challenges for infrastructure. Roads, pipelines, and buildings can be buried or damaged by encroaching sand. Engineers use a combination of physical barriers, windbreaks, and regular maintenance to keep routes open. In some cases, entire settlements have been relocated to avoid the relentless advance of dunes. The study of dunes is not limited to Earth. Planetary scientists compare Sahara dunes to those found on Mars and Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Similar processes of wind-driven sand movement occur there, though the materials and atmospheric conditions differ. By studying dunes in the Sahara, researchers gain insights into the climates and surface processes of other worlds. Cultural connections to dunes run deep. In poetry, music, and storytelling, dunes are symbols of time, change, and endurance. Their shifting forms mirror the impermanence of human life, while their vastness evokes awe. For some communities, specific dunes are landmarks with names and histories, marking routes or significant events. Tourism often focuses on dune landscapes, with visitors drawn to the towering heights of places like Erg Chebbi in Morocco or the Grand Erg Oriental in Algeria. Climbing a dune at sunrise or sunset offers sweeping views and the chance to witness the play of light and shadow across the sand. However, increased foot and vehicle traffic can damage fragile surfaces, leading to erosion and changes in dune stability. Responsible tourism practices aim to minimize these impacts while allowing people to experience the beauty of the desert. The science of dune movement also intersects with climate research. Changes in wind patterns, driven by shifts in global climate, can alter the rate and direction of dune migration. By studying ancient dune deposits, scientists can reconstruct past climates, helping to predict future trends. This information is valuable not only for understanding the Sahara but also for anticipating changes in other arid regions. Efforts to manage dune movement often combine traditional knowledge with modern techniques. Planting hardy shrubs or grasses can anchor sand, while carefully placed fences disrupt wind flow. In some areas, oil or other stabilizing agents have been sprayed on dunes to prevent movement, though these methods can have environmental drawbacks. The most sustainable approaches tend to work with natural processes rather than against them. In the end, dunes are a reminder of the desert's constant motion. They are shaped by forces that operate on scales from the microscopic, the movement of individual grains, to the planetary, the circulation of winds across continents. To live in the Sahara is to accept this motion, to adapt to it, and when possible to use it to one's advantage. The shifting dunes are not obstacles to be conquered but features to be understood. They tell stories of wind and time, of life finding a foothold in unlikely places, and of the delicate balance between stability and change. For those who study them, they are both a challenge and a source of endless fascination. For those who live among them, they are part of the fabric of daily life, as familiar as the sky above and the sand beneath their feet. When the sun sets over the Sahara, the transformation is immediate and profound. The heat of the day dissipates, the wind often calms, and the sky becomes a vast, unbroken canvas. Without the interference of city lights, the desert night reveals a spectacle that has inspired awe for millennia. Stars appear in numbers that seem impossible to those accustomed to urban skies, and the Milky Way stretches across the horizon like a luminous river. For centuries, the night sky has been both a guide and a calendar for desert travelers. Nomadic groups learned to navigate by the stars, using constellations as fixed points in an otherwise shifting landscape. The North Star, Polaris, has long been a reliable marker for direction, while seasonal constellations signaled changes in weather and the timing of migrations. This celestial knowledge was passed down orally, often woven into stories and songs that preserved both practical information and cultural identity. Astronomically, the Sahara offers some of the clearest skies on Earth. The dry air, minimal light pollution, and high visibility make it an ideal location for stargazing and scientific observation. Modern astronomers have taken advantage of these conditions, establishing observatories in remote areas to study everything from planetary motion to deep space phenomena. Telescopes here can capture faint light from distant galaxies, providing data that would be obscured in more humid or light-polluted environments. The desert's night sky is also a time capsule. The light from some stars visible above the Sahara began its journey millions of years ago. Observing them is, in a sense, looking back in time. This perspective has long fascinated both scientists and storytellers, who see in the stars a connection between the present moment and the vast history of the universe. Meteor showers are particularly striking in the Sahara. With no clouds and little atmospheric moisture, even faint meteors are visible. Events like the Perseids or Geminids can turn the sky into a dynamic display, with streaks of light crossing the darkness every few minutes. For desert communities, these events have often been interpreted as omens or messages, their meanings varying from one culture to another. The moon plays a central role in desert life. Its phases have been used to mark time, plan journeys, and schedule festivals. A full moon can illuminate the dunes so brightly that travelers can move at night without artificial light, avoiding the heat of the day. In some traditions, the moon is personified, its waxing and waning linked to cycles of growth, rest, and renewal. For scientists, the Sahara's night sky is a laboratory for studying atmospheric conditions. The clarity of the air allows for precise measurements of starlight, which can be used to detect subtle changes in the atmosphere's composition. This research contributes to climate studies, helping scientists understand how dust, moisture, and temperature interact on a global scale. The desert's darkness is increasingly rare in the modern world. Light pollution has spread across much of the planet, obscuring the stars for billions of people. In the Sahara, however, vast areas remain untouched by artificial light. This makes the region valuable not only for science but also for cultural preservation, offering future generations the chance to experience the night sky as their ancestors did. Astrophotography has become a growing attraction in the Sahara. Photographers travel from around the world to capture images of the Milky Way rising over dunes, or the silhouette of a camel caravan against a backdrop of stars. These images often go viral, drawing attention to the beauty of the desert and the importance of protecting its dark skies. The connection between the Sahara and the stars is not purely observational. Ancient structures in and around the desert, such as stone circles and alignments, suggest that early inhabitants tracked celestial events. Some of these sites predate the pyramids of Egypt, indicating that astronomy has deep roots in the region's history. Alignments with solstices, equinoxes, and specific stars hint at a sophisticated understanding of the sky. In modern times, space agencies and research institutions have considered the Sahara as a testing ground for planetary exploration. The terrain, climate, and isolation make it an analog for conditions on Mars. Rovers, habitats, and instruments have been trialed here, with a clear night sky providing an additional opportunity to test astronomical equipment. Culturally, the stars continue to inspire art, music, and literature in the Sahara. Poets describe the night as a vast tent, its fabric woven with light. Musicians compose songs that mirror the rhythms of celestial cycles. Storytellers use constellations as characters in tales that blend myth and memory. These traditions keep the night sky alive in the collective imagination, ensuring that it remains more than just a scientific subject. The desert night also has a psychological dimension. Away from the noise and distractions of modern life, the vastness of the sky can evoke a sense of perspective. Problems seem smaller under a dome of stars that have shone for millions of years. This experience can be humbling, even transformative, fostering a deeper connection to the natural world. Preserving the Sahara's night sky requires conscious effort. As development and tourism expand, there is a risk of introducing light pollution. Initiatives to create dark sky reserves aim to protect these areas, setting guidelines for outdoor lighting and promoting awareness of the value of natural darkness. Such measures benefit not only astronomers but also wildlife, which can be disrupted by artificial light. The science of the stars and the culture of the desert are intertwined. Each informs the other, creating a relationship that is both practical and poetic. The same constellations that guided caravans centuries ago now guide satellites and spacecraft. The same moon that lit the way for nomads now serves as a target for exploration. In this way, the Sahara's night sky bridges past and future, tradition and innovation. For those who experience it, the memory of a desert night often lingers. The silence, the clarity, and the sheer scale of the sky leave an impression that is hard to replicate elsewhere. It is a reminder that, despite our technological advances, we remain part of a universe that is vast, mysterious, and beautiful. In the end, the Sahara's night sky is more than a backdrop. It is a living part of the desert's identity, shaping how people move, think, and dream. Protecting it ensures that future generations can stand under the same stars, feel the same wonder, and perhaps find their own place in the story written across the heavens. Long before modern borders and highways, the Sahara was crisscrossed by a network of trade routes that connected distant civilizations. These paths, carved by the footsteps of merchants and the hooves of camels, carried not only goods but also ideas, languages, and cultures. The desert, often seen as a barrier, was in fact a bridge linking the Mediterranean world with sub-Saharan Africa. The most famous of these routes was the Trans-Saharan Trade Network, which reached its height between the 8th and 16th centuries. Caravans traveled for weeks or months, moving salt, gold, ivory, textiles, and slaves between regions. Salt, mined from places like Tagaza and Todeni, was as valuable as gold in many parts of West Africa, where it was essential for preserving food and maintaining health. Gold from the kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai flowed north, enriching cities across North Africa and Europe. Caravans were meticulously organized. A large caravan could include hundreds of camels, each carrying up to 200 kilograms of goods. Experienced guides, often from nomadic tribes, led the way, navigating by stars and landmarks. The timing of departures was critical. Most caravans traveled in the cooler months to avoid the deadly heat of summer. Even so, the journey was perilous. Sandstorms could obscure the path, wells could run dry, and bandits sometimes targeted the slow-moving lines of traders. Oases were the lifelines of these routes. Towns like Timbuktu, Gao, and Gadams became thriving centers of commerce and culture. Merchants exchanged goods, scholars shared knowledge, and travelers from distant lands mingled in bustling markets. Timbuktu, in particular, became renowned not just for trade but for learning, with libraries and universities that attracted students from across the Islamic world. The spread of Islam was closely tied to these trade routes. Muslim merchants and scholars carried their faith along with their goods, establishing mosques and schools in desert towns. Arabic became the language of commerce and scholarship, linking diverse peoples through a shared medium of communication. This cultural exchange enriched both sides of the desert, blending traditions into new forms of art, architecture, and literature. The camel was the true engine of the Sahara's trade. Known as the ship of the desert, it could travel for days without water, withstand extreme temperatures, and carry heavy loads. The introduction of the camel saddle around the 3rd century CE revolutionized desert transport, making long-distance trade more efficient and reliable. Without camels, the vast scale of trans-Saharan commerce would have been impossible. Trade was not limited to luxury goods. Everyday items like grain, dates, and cloth also moved along these routes, supporting the livelihoods of countless people. In return, desert communities supplied caravans with food, water, and shelter, creating a web of interdependence that spanned thousands of kilometers. The decline of the trans-Saharan trade began in the late 15th century, as European maritime powers opened sea routes to West Africa. Ships could carry larger cargoes more quickly and safely than caravans, bypassing the dangers of the desert. Over time, many of the great caravan towns lost their prominence, though some continued to serve as regional markets. Even in decline, the legacy of these routes endures. The cultural and linguistic connections forged through centuries of exchange remain visible today. Architectural styles, musical traditions, and culinary influences bear the imprint of this long history of contact. In some areas, annual festivals still celebrate the arrival of caravans, honoring the skills and endurance of those who once braved the desert's challenges. Modern historians and archaeologists study the remnants of these routes to better understand the economic and social dynamics of the past. Ancient caravanserais, fortified inns where travelers could rest, still stand in some places, their walls weathered but intact. Inscriptions, manuscripts, and oral histories provide further insight into the lives of traders and the goods they carried. Satellite imagery has revealed traces of old paths, now buried under shifting sands. These findings help reconstruct the geography of trade and identify sites for excavation. They also highlight the adaptability of desert peoples, who adjusted their routes in response to environmental changes, political shifts, and market demands. Today, some of the old routes are seeing renewed interest. Tourism has revived parts of the caravan tradition, with guided camel treks retracing historic paths. In certain regions, cross-border trade still follows ancient patterns, though trucks have replaced camels for most goods. Efforts to preserve and promote this heritage aim to balance economic opportunity with respect for the environment and local culture. The story of the Sahara's trade routes is also a story of resilience. Traders faced extreme conditions, yet they built systems that endured for centuries. Their success depended on cooperation across cultural and political boundaries, as well as a deep understanding of the desert's rhythms. This legacy offers lessons for modern commerce and diplomacy, showing how shared interests can bridge even the harshest divides. In the broader sweep of history, the Sahara's trade routes remind us that deserts are not empty spaces. They are dynamic environments where human ingenuity has flourished. The movement of goods and ideas across the Sahara shaped economies, transformed societies, and connected continents. The echoes of that movement still resonate, in the languages spoken, the stories told, and the bonds that link communities across vast distances. Standing in a desert town at dusk, one can imagine the arrival of a caravan, the distant jingle of bells, the silhouettes of camels against the fading light, the murmur of voices as traders greet one another. The air carries the scent of spices and the dust of the road. In that moment, the centuries between past and present seem to dissolve, and the enduring spirit of the Sahara's trade routes comes alive once more. At first glance, the Sahara appears lifeless, an endless expanse of sand and rock under a relentless sun. Yet beneath this harsh exterior lies a surprisingly rich web of life. From the smallest insects to large mammals, each species has evolved unique adaptations to survive in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. The foundation of desert life begins with plants. Without vegetation, there would be no food or shelter for animals. Many Sahara plants have deep root systems that tap into underground water, while others store moisture in their leaves or stems. The desert date palm, for example, provides shade, food, and nesting sites for birds and insects. Small shrubs like the saltbush can tolerate high salinity, allowing them to grow in soils where other plants cannot. These plants stabilize the soil, reduce erosion, and form microhabitats that support other life. Insects are among the most numerous desert inhabitants. Beetles, ants, and grasshoppers thrive here, often active during cooler parts of the day or night. The fog-basking beetle of the Namib Desert, a distant ecological cousin to some Sahara species, demonstrates a similar survival trick, collecting moisture from morning fog on its body, which then drips into its mouth. While fog is rare in most of the Sahara, some insects exploit dew or moisture from plants in comparable ways. Reptiles are well suited to desert life. The horned viper, with its distinctive sidewinding movement, can travel efficiently over loose sand while avoiding overheating. Its camouflage allows it to ambush prey and avoid predators. The desert monitor lizard is another formidable resident, capable of covering large distances in search of food. These reptiles regulate their body temperature by alternating between sun and shade, and many can go long periods without direct water intake, obtaining moisture from their prey. Birds bring mobility to the desert ecosystem. Species like the desert lark and sandgrouse are adapted to long flights between scarce resources. Sandgrouse are particularly remarkable. Males soak their belly feathers in water at distant sources, then fly back to their nests, where chicks drink directly from the feathers. Migratory birds also pass through the Sahara, timing their journeys to coincide with seasonal rains that briefly transform parts of the desert into feeding grounds. Mammals in the Sahara range from small rodents to large herbivores. The jerboa, with its long hind legs, can leap great distances to escape predators and conserve energy. It is nocturnal, avoiding the heat of the day, and survives on seeds and plants that provide both food and water. The addax antelope, critically endangered, is a master of endurance, able to survive without free water for long periods by metabolizing moisture from the plants it eats. Its pale coat reflects sunlight, helping it stay cool. Predators are fewer but vital to the balance of the ecosystem. The fennec fox, with its oversized ears, dissipates heat and detects prey underground. It feeds on insects, small mammals, and plants, making it an opportunistic survivor. The African wildcat, thought to be an ancestor of domestic cats, hunts rodents and birds, controlling populations that might otherwise overwhelm limited vegetation. Nocturnality is a common strategy across species. By being active at night, animals avoid the extreme heat and reduce water loss. Many have enhanced senses, keen hearing, excellent night vision, or acute smell, to navigate and hunt in darkness. Burrowing is another widespread adaptation. Rodents, reptiles, and insects dig into the sand to escape surface temperatures that can exceed 50 degrees Celsius. Underground, conditions are cooler and more stable, and humidity is higher. Water conservation is critical. Many desert animals have highly efficient kidneys that concentrate urine, minimizing water loss. Some can tolerate higher body temperatures than most mammals, reducing the need for evaporative cooling through sweating or panting. Behavioral adaptations, such as resting in shade or orienting the body away from the sun, further reduce heat stress. The Sahara's wildlife is not evenly distributed. Life clusters around oases, seasonal rivers, and areas where underground water is close to the surface. After rare rains, dormant seeds germinate rapidly, attracting herbivores, which in turn draw predators. These brief bursts of abundance are crucial for reproduction, as many species time their breeding to coincide with periods of greater food availability. Human activity has both threatened and supported desert wildlife. Overhunting, habitat loss, and climate change have reduced populations of many species. However, conservation efforts are underway. Protected areas such as the Ahagar National Park in Algeria and the Termit and Tintuma National Nature Reserve in Niger aim to safeguard habitats and restore endangered species. Community-based programs encourage sustainable grazing, limit hunting, and promote ecotourism that benefits both people and wildlife. Scientific research in the Sahara often focuses on understanding how species cope with extreme conditions. This knowledge has applications beyond conservation. Studying desert animals' water retention strategies, for example, can inspire new technologies for water conservation in agriculture. Insights into heat tolerance may inform medical research on managing heat stress in humans. The resilience of Sahara wildlife is a testament to the power of adaptation. Each species represents a solution to the challenges of heat, aridity, and scarcity. Together, they form a complex web of interactions: plants providing food and shelter, herbivores shaping vegetation patterns, predators controlling prey populations, and decomposers recycling nutrients into the soil. Culturally, desert animals hold symbolic significance. The camel is a symbol of endurance and survival, celebrated in poetry and song. The fennec fox appears in folklore as a clever and resourceful figure. Even dangerous creatures like the viper are respected for their role in maintaining balance. These cultural connections reinforce the importance of wildlife to the identity of desert communities. Looking ahead, the survival of the Sahara's hidden wildlife will depend on balancing human needs with environmental stewardship. Climate change may alter rainfall patterns, shift vegetation zones, and increase the frequency of extreme heat events. Protecting migration corridors, preserving water sources, and reducing human-wildlife conflict will be essential. In the quiet of the desert night, the presence of life is subtle: the rustle of a lizard in the sand, the distant call of a bird, the tracks of a fox etched in the morning dunes. These signs remind us that even in the harshest places, life finds a way. The Sahara's wildlife is not just surviving, it is thriving in ways that challenge our understanding of resilience. The story of these animals is part of the larger story of the desert itself, a place of extremes but also of intricate connections and enduring beauty. By studying and protecting them, we not only preserve biodiversity but also honor the ingenuity of life in all its forms. Scattered across the Sahara's vast expanse are silent galleries of stone, where ancient artists carved and painted their visions of the world. These rock art sites, some dating back more than 10,000 years, are among the most important archaeological treasures on Earth. They offer a window into the lives, beliefs, and environments of people who lived in the desert long before it became the arid landscape we know today. The most famous of these sites is the Tassili Eniger Plateau in southeastern Algeria. Here, thousands of images cover sandstone cliffs and caves, depicting animals, humans, and abstract symbols. The art spans several distinct periods, each reflecting changes in climate, culture, and technology. Early works show lush landscapes filled with giraffes, elephants, and crocodiles, evidence that the Sahara was once a green savanna with abundant water. These early round-head paintings, named for the distinctive shape of human figures, often depict scenes of ritual or ceremony. Some show people wearing elaborate headdresses, possibly representing spiritual leaders or shamans. The meaning of these images is still debated, but many researchers believe they reflect a worldview in which humans, animals, and the environment were deeply interconnected. As the climate began to dry around 6,000 years ago, the art shifted to what is known as the pastoral period. Paintings and carvings from this era show domesticated cattle herding scenes, and people engaged in daily activities like milking, dancing, and cooking. The presence of cattle suggests a shift from hunting and gathering to pastoralism, with communities adapting to the changing environment by managing livestock. Later, during the horse period around 3,000 years ago, images of horses, chariots, and armed riders appear. These reflect the introduction of the horse to North Africa and the rise of more mobile societies. The art from this period often depicts conflict, hunting, and travel, hinting at increased competition for resources as the desert expanded. The most recent phase, the Camel period, began about 2,000 years ago and continues into historic times. Camels, better suited to desert life than horses, became the primary means of transport. Rock art from this era often shows caravans, traders, and scenes of daily life in a fully arid Sahara. Some images include Arabic inscriptions, linking the ancient tradition of rock art to the Islamic period. Beyond Tassili Eniger, other important sites include the Ennedi Plateau in Chad, the Mesak Setafet in Libya, and the Gilf Kabir in Egypt. Each region has its own style and themes, reflecting local cultures and histories. Some sites feature engravings rather than paintings, with lines carved into the rock to create images that have endured for millennia. The techniques used to create this art varied. Pigments made from minerals like ochre, hematite, and manganese produced reds, yellows, and blacks. Brushes were fashioned from plant fibers or animal hair, while fingers were also used to apply paint directly. Engravings were made by pecking or incising the rock surface with stone tools. The durability of these methods has allowed the art to survive despite centuries of wind, sand, and sun. Interpreting the meaning of rock art is challenging. Without written records, researchers rely on comparisons with modern and historic cultures, as well as the context of the images themselves. Some scenes clearly depict hunting or herding, while others are more abstract, possibly representing myths, spiritual beliefs, or symbolic maps. The repetition of certain motifs, such as concentric circles, animal tracks, or human figures in specific poses, suggests shared cultural ideas across wide areas. Rock art also provides valuable information about the Sahara's environmental history. The presence of animals like hippos, antelope, and fish in early paintings confirms that large lakes and rivers once existed where there is now desert. This evidence supports geological and climate studies showing that the Sahara has undergone dramatic shifts between wet and dry periods over the past 10,000 years. For local communities, these sites are more than archaeological curiosities, they are part of a living heritage. Some nomadic groups still tell stories that echo the themes of the ancient art, linking present-day traditions to a deep past. Protecting these sites is therefore both a scientific and cultural priority. Unfortunately, many rock art sites are under threat. Natural erosion, vandalism, and looting have damaged irreplaceable images. Political instability in some regions has made it difficult to monitor and protect remote locations. Tourism, while potentially beneficial for raising awareness, can also cause harm if not carefully managed. Touching the art, walking on fragile surfaces, or introducing moisture from breath and sweat can accelerate deterioration. Conservation efforts involve a combination of documentation, physical protection, and community engagement. High-resolution photography, 3D scanning, and digital archiving allow researchers to preserve detailed records of the art, even if the originals are lost. Fencing, signage, and guided access can reduce physical damage, while involving local people in protection efforts fosters a sense of ownership and responsibility. International organizations like UNESCO have recognized the importance of Sahara rock art, designating sites like Tassili Eniger and the Ennedi Plateau as World Heritage Sites. This status brings global attention and resources, but long-term preservation depends on sustained local and national commitment. The study of Sahara rock art continues to evolve. Advances in dating techniques, such as radiocarbon analysis of organic pigments or optically stimulated luminescence of sediments, are refining timelines and revealing new insights. Comparative studies with rock art in other parts of Africa and the world are helping to place the Sahara's art in a broader human context. For many researchers, the most compelling aspect of this art is its humanity. Across thousands of years, the images show people adapting to change, celebrating life, and expressing beliefs. They remind us that the Sahara was once a place of rivers and grasslands, where communities thrived and created beauty that still speaks to us today. Standing before a panel of ancient paintings, one can almost feel the presence of the artist. Someone who lived in a world both familiar and alien, who chose to leave a mark that would outlast generations. The figures, animals, and symbols are not just remnants of the past. They are messages across time, inviting us to imagine, to learn, and to remember. The Sahara's rock art is a testament to resilience, creativity, and the enduring human desire to tell stories. Protecting it ensures that these voices from the deep past will continue to inspire and inform, connecting us to a chapter of human history written not in books, but on the very stones of the earth. The Sahara is shaped as much by the wind as by the sun. Day after day, invisible currents sweep across its surface, lifting, carrying, and sculpting billions of grains of sand. These winds are not just background forces. They are active agents in the desert's evolution, influencing its landscapes, ecosystems, and even the climate far beyond its borders. The most famous of these winds is the harmattan, a dry, dusty northeasterly that blows from the Sahara toward the Atlantic between late November and mid-March. It can carry fine particles thousands of kilometers, reducing visibility and coating everything in a reddish film. For people living in West Africa, the harmattan brings cooler temperatures but also dry skin, irritated eyes, and respiratory discomfort. Its arrival is predictable enough to be part of seasonal planning, yet its intensity can vary greatly from year to year. In North Africa, the sirocco is another well-known wind. Originating in the Sahara, it carries hot, dry air northward into the Mediterranean. When it reaches southern Europe, it can raise temperatures dramatically and deposit a thin layer of desert dust on cars, rooftops, and even snow-covered mountains. The sirocco's impact on weather, agriculture, and daily life is a reminder that the Sahara's influence extends far beyond its boundaries. Sandstorms, or haboobs, are among the most dramatic wind events in the desert. These walls of dust can rise hundreds of meters into the air and stretch for kilometers. They form when downdrafts from thunderstorms hit the ground, lifting loose sand and dust into a dense, fast-moving front. Visibility can drop to near zero in seconds, making travel dangerous. For desert communities, recognizing the signs of an approaching storm, a darkening horizon, a sudden shift in wind, is essential for safety. The science of sand transport begins with the movement of individual grains. When wind speed exceeds a certain threshold, it can dislodge grains from the surface. Larger grains tend to roll or slide along the ground, while smaller ones are lifted briefly into the air before falling back in a hopping motion known as saltation. The smallest particles, less than 0.1 millimeters in diameter, can be carried high into the atmosphere and transported across continents. This long-distance dust transport has global consequences. Sahara dust regularly crosses the Atlantic, reaching the Caribbean, South America, and even the southeastern United States. In the Amazon rainforest, nutrients from Sahara dust help fertilize the soil, replenishing minerals lost to heavy rainfall. Over the ocean, dust can influence cloud formation and affect the amount of sunlight reaching the surface. Within the Sahara, wind patterns shape the distribution of dunes, ergs, sand seas, and rocky plateaus. Persistent winds create linear dunes that align with prevailing directions, while variable winds form star dunes with multiple arms. The interaction between wind and topography produces complex patterns that can shift over time, altering habitats and navigation routes. For scientists, studying these processes is crucial for understanding desert dynamics and predicting changes. Remote sensing from satellites allows researchers to track dust plumes in real time, while ground-based instruments measure wind speed, direction, and particle size. Computer models simulate how winds interact with the surface, helping to forecast storm events and assess their potential impacts. Wind also plays a role in erosion and deposition. Over thousands of years, it can wear down rock surfaces, creating features like ventifacts, stones polished and shaped by wind-blown sand. In some areas, wind erosion has exposed ancient riverbeds, fossils, and archaeological sites, offering glimpses into the Sahara's wetter past. At the same time, deposition of sand can bury landscapes, preserving them until shifting winds reveal them again. For people living in the desert, wind is both a challenge and a resource. Strong winds can damage crops, erode soil, and make travel hazardous. Yet they also bring cooler air, disperse pests, and in some cases power windmills or modern turbines. Traditional architecture in desert towns often incorporates wind-catching towers or narrow streets that channel breezes, providing natural cooling in hot weather. Cultural perceptions of wind vary. In some traditions, winds are personified as spirits or deities, each with its own personality and influence. Stories and proverbs describe the wind's power to bring change for better or worse. Seasonal winds mark the passage of time, guiding agricultural cycles, migrations, and festivals. Climate change may alter the Sahara's wind patterns. Rising temperatures and shifting pressure systems could change the frequency and intensity of dust storms, with implications for health, agriculture, and global climate. Increased desertification in surrounding regions could add to the supply of loose material available for transport, potentially amplifying these effects. Efforts to mitigate wind erosion often focus on stabilizing the surface. Planting vegetation, building windbreaks, and managing grazing can reduce the amount of loose sand available for movement. In some areas, barriers of woven palm fronds or stone are placed around fields to protect crops from blowing sand. These measures require maintenance and community cooperation to remain effective. The study of desert winds also has applications beyond Earth. On Mars, for example, wind is a major force shaping the landscape, moving sand dunes and dust across the planet's surface. By understanding how wind operates in the Sahara, scientists can better interpret similar features on Mars and other worlds. In the end, the Sahara's winds are a reminder of the desert's constant motion. They connect distant places through the movement of dust, shape the land into ever-changing forms, and influence life in ways both subtle and dramatic. To live in the Sahara is to live with the wind, to respect its power, adapt to its rhythms, and when possible harness its energy. Standing on a dune as the wind rises, one can feel the desert's pulse. The grains of sand sting the skin, the air hums with movement, and the horizon blurs into a shifting haze. It is a moment that captures the essence of the Sahara, vast, dynamic, and always in motion. Long before the Sahara became the vast desert we know today, it was home to enormous lakes, rivers, and wetlands. These bodies of water supported thriving ecosystems and human settlements, leaving behind traces that still shape the desert's geography. Studying these ancient lakes is not just an exercise in archaeology. It is a key to understanding climate change, human adaptation, and the shifting balance between water and land. One of the most famous of these vanished giants is Lake Megachad. At its peak around 7,000 years ago, it was the largest freshwater lake on Earth, covering an area larger than the Caspian Sea. Fed by rivers from the surrounding highlands, it supported fish, crocodiles, hippos, and a rich variety of birdlife. Human communities along its shores fished, farmed, and traded, leaving behind pottery, tools, and settlement remains. Today, only a fraction of that water remains in the form of Lake Chad, which has itself shrunk dramatically in recent decades due to climate change, irrigation, and population growth. Other ancient lakes once dotted the Sahara. In Libya's Fezzan region, the remnants of paleolakes are visible as salt flats and sediment layers. These lakes were fed by underground aquifers and seasonal rainfall during wetter climatic periods. Fossils of aquatic animals and pollen from water-loving plants confirm that these areas were once lush and green. In Egypt's western desert, the Fayum Depression and the now-dry Lake Moeris played a similar role, sustaining agriculture and settlement for thousands of years. The disappearance of these lakes was driven by a combination of natural and human factors. Around 5,000 years ago, the African humid period came to an end. Monsoon rains shifted southward, reducing the amount of water flowing into the Sahara. As evaporation outpaced inflow, lakes began to shrink. In some cases, rivers feeding them dried up entirely, leaving behind isolated basins that slowly turned into salt flats or sand-covered depressions. For ancient peoples, the retreat of water meant profound changes. Communities that had relied on fishing and farming were forced to adapt, moving toward pastoralism or migrating to more fertile regions. Archaeological evidence shows shifts in settlement patterns, tool use, and diet during this period. Rock art from the time depicts fewer aquatic animals and more scenes of herding, reflecting the changing environment. Modern science has revealed much about these ancient lakes through satellite imagery and sediment analysis. Radar systems can detect buried river channels and lake beds beneath the sand, while core samples from these sites preserve layers of silt, pollen, and microfossils that tell the story of past climates. These records show that the Sahara has undergone multiple wet-dry cycles over the past hundreds of thousands of years, each reshaping its landscapes and ecosystems. The legacy of these lakes is still visible in the desert's hydrology. Many oases are located in former lake basins, where underground water remains trapped in aquifers. These hidden reserves are vital for modern communities, providing drinking water and irrigation in an otherwise arid environment. However, they are finite resources, and over-extraction can lead to depletion and land subsidence. Lake Chad's modern decline is a stark reminder of how quickly water systems can change. In the 1960s, the lake covered more than 25,000 square kilometers. Today, it is less than a tenth of that size in most years. While natural variability plays a role, human activities such as dam construction, irrigation, and deforestation have accelerated the loss. The shrinking lake has disrupted fishing, farming, and pastoral livelihoods, contributing to economic hardship and in some cases conflict over resources. Efforts to restore or stabilize Lake Chad include proposals to divert water from the Congo River basin, improve irrigation efficiency, and promote sustainable land management. These projects face technical, political, and environmental challenges, but they highlight the importance of regional cooperation in managing shared water resources. The story of the Sahara's disappearing lakes also has global implications. Understanding how past climate shifts affected these water systems can help predict the impacts of future changes. For example, models suggest that warming temperatures could alter rainfall patterns in ways that either partially restore or further diminish desert lakes. Studying ancient shorelines and sediment layers provides valuable data for refining these predictions. Culturally, the memory of these lakes persists in oral traditions, place names, and archaeological remains. In some communities, legends speak of great waters that once covered the land, inhabited by spirits or mythical creatures. These stories, while not literal histories, often preserve kernels of truth about environmental change and human adaptation. Tourism has begun to focus on these ancient lake sites, with visitors drawn to the stark beauty of salt flats, fossil beds, and rock art panels depicting aquatic life. Responsible tourism can bring economic benefits while raising awareness of the region's environmental history. However, it must be managed carefully to avoid damaging fragile archaeological and ecological sites. From a scientific perspective, the Sahara's ancient lakes are natural laboratories for studying resilience. They show how ecosystems respond to rapid change, how species migrate or adapt, and how human societies innovate in the face of scarcity. These lessons are increasingly relevant as modern populations confront water shortages, desertification, and climate instability. The preservation of these sites is urgent. Looting, unregulated development, and climate impacts threaten to erase valuable evidence. International collaboration, local stewardship, and investment in research are essential to protect and study these remnants of a greener Sahara. Standing on the edge of a dry lake bed, it is easy to imagine the water returning, waves lapping at the shore, birds wheeling overhead, and the air alive with the sounds of life. While the Sahara's Great Lakes may never fully return, their legacy endures in the land, the people, and the knowledge they have left behind. The story of the Sahara's disappearing lakes is not just about loss, it is about transformation. It is a reminder that landscapes are never static, that water can shape civilizations, and that adaptation is as much a part of survival as endurance. By studying the past, we gain tools to navigate the future, not only in the Sahara but in every place where water and life are intertwined. The Sahara has not always been the formidable barrier it appears today. Over tens of thousands of years, it has alternated between being a dry, inhospitable expanse and a green, habitable corridor. These shifts have profoundly influenced the movement of people, shaping the genetic, cultural, and linguistic landscapes of Africa, Europe, and beyond. During wetter periods, known as African humid phases, the Sahara transformed into a mosaic of grasslands, lakes, and rivers. These green corridors allowed humans and animals to move freely between North Africa and sub-Saharan regions. Archaeological evidence from sites across the desert, stone tools, pottery, and settlement remains, shows that people lived, farmed, and fished in areas that are now barren. One of the most significant migration events linked to the Sahara occurred during the last major humid phase, roughly 14,000 to 5,000 years ago. As rainfall increased, hunter-gatherer groups expanded into the interior, exploiting rich fishing grounds and fertile soils. Rock art from this period depicts abundant wildlife, boats, and scenes of daily life, confirming the presence of thriving communities. As the climate shifted toward aridity around 5,000 years ago, these populations faced a choice: adapt to the drying environment or move to more hospitable regions. Many migrated toward the Nile Valley, contributing to the rise of ancient Egyptian civilization. Others moved south into the Sahel and West Africa, bringing with them agricultural practices, livestock and cultural traditions. The Sahara also played a role in the spread of languages. Linguists trace the Afroasiatic language family, which includes Arabic, Berber, Hausa, and Ancient Egyptian, to regions near the Sahara. The movement of peoples during humid and arid phases likely facilitated the spread and diversification of these languages, creating the complex linguistic map we see today. Genetic studies support the idea of repeated population exchanges across the Sahara. DNA evidence shows shared ancestry between North African, Sub-Saharan, and even Southern European populations, reflecting ancient migrations in both directions. These genetic links are not the result of a single event but of multiple waves of movement over thousands of years. The desert's role as both bridge and barrier is evident in the history of trans-Saharan trade. While the focus is often on goods like gold and salt, the movement of people, traders, scholars, soldiers, and slaves, also shaped the demographic makeup of the regions connected by these routes. Over centuries, this exchange created a blend of cultures visible in architecture, music, cuisine, and belief systems. In prehistoric times, the Sahara may have been a critical route for the dispersal of modern humans out of Africa. Some researchers propose that during humid phases, populations moved northward through the Sahara into the Levant and Europe. This northern route would have complemented the better-known coastal and Nile Valley pathways, offering multiple avenues for human expansion. The desert's shifting climate also influenced the domestication and spread of plants and animals. Sorghum, millet, and other crops likely moved between regions via Green Saharan corridors, while domesticated cattle and goats spread along similar routes. These exchanges enriched agricultural diversity and resilience in multiple regions. Even in its arid state, the Sahara has not been an absolute barrier. Nomadic groups such as the Tuareg have maintained trans-desert connections for centuries, guiding caravans and facilitating cultural exchange. Their knowledge of routes, water sources, and survival strategies has been passed down through generations, preserving a living link between distant communities. Modern research into the Sahara's role in migration combines archaeology, genetics, linguistics, and climate science. Satellite imagery reveals ancient river channels and lake beds, suggesting possible migration pathways. Excavations uncover tools, ornaments, and human remains that fill gaps in the timeline of movement. Genetic analysis traces the flow of genes across continents, while linguistic studies map the spread of words and grammatical structures. Climate models help explain the timing of these migrations. The African humid periods were driven by changes in Earth's orbit, which altered the intensity of the West African monsoon. When the monsoon strengthened, rainfall increased, vegetation spread, and lakes filled. When it weakened, the desert expanded, forcing people and animals to retreat to refuges along rivers, coasts, and highlands. The Sahara's influence on migration is not just a story of the distant past. In modern times, it remains a major route for people moving from sub-Saharan Africa toward North Africa and Europe. These journeys are often perilous, with migrants facing extreme heat, scarce water, and political instability. The motivations, economic opportunity, safety, and family reunification echo the survival imperatives that have driven movement for millennia. Understanding the Sahara's role in human migration offers valuable lessons for the future. As climate change alters rainfall patterns and temperatures, regions that are now marginal could become more or less habitable. Historical examples show that people respond to environmental change with mobility, innovation, and adaptation. Recognizing these patterns can inform policies on migration, resource management, and cultural preservation. Culturally, the memory of migration is embedded in stories, songs, and identities. Many communities trace their origins to ancestors who crossed the desert, whether in search of pasture, trade, or refuge. These narratives reinforce connections between distant places and remind us that the Sahara, despite its vastness, has always been part of a larger human network. The desert's dual nature, as both a connector and a divider, has shaped the course of civilizations. It has facilitated the spread of ideas, technologies, and genes, while also preserving distinct cultures through isolation. This balance between exchange and separation is part of what makes the Sahara's history so complex and fascinating. Standing at the edge of the desert today, one can imagine the countless footsteps that have crossed its sands. Some were part of great migrations that reshaped continents. Others were solitary journeys driven by personal need or ambition. Each left a trace, however faint, in the human story. The Sahara's role in human migration is a reminder that landscapes are not passive backdrops. They are active participants in history, shaping and being shaped by the movements of people. The desert's shifting boundaries, its cycles of greening and drying, have been both challenge and opportunity, obstacle and pathway. In the end, the Sahara is not just a place on the map. It is a dynamic force that has connected and divided, nurtured and tested for tens of thousands of years. Its sands hold the memory of journeys that continue to influence who we are and where we come from. By studying these patterns, we gain not only a deeper understanding of the past but also a clearer vision of the paths that may lie ahead. The Sahara, often imagined as eternal and unchanging, is in fact a landscape in constant motion. Its dunes shift daily, its winds carry dust across oceans, and its climate has swung between extremes over millennia. As we look toward the future, the desert faces a new chapter, one shaped by the combined forces of environmental change, human innovation, and the enduring resilience of its people. Climate change is the most pressing factor influencing the Sahara's trajectory. Rising global temperatures are expected to intensify heat waves, alter rainfall patterns, and increase the frequency of extreme weather events. For the Sahara, this could mean further expansion into surrounding regions, threatening the livelihoods of millions in the Sahel and beyond. Shifts in the West African monsoon could bring sporadic greening in some areas, but also prolonged drought in others, each with profound consequences for ecosystems and communities. Desertification remains a critical concern. Overgrazing, deforestation, and unsustainable farming practices degrade soil, making it more vulnerable to erosion by wind and water. Once vegetation cover is lost, restoring it becomes increasingly difficult. The loss of arable land forces migration, increases competition for resources, and can exacerbate political instability. Yet the Sahara is not only a site of risk, it is also a place of opportunity. Its vast open spaces and abundant sunlight make it one of the most promising regions in the world for solar energy production. Large-scale projects, such as concentrated solar power plants, could generate electricity not only for North Africa but for export to Europe and other regions. Harnessing this potential requires investment, infrastructure, and careful planning to ensure that benefits are shared equitably and that local communities are active participants rather than passive bystanders. Tourism offers another avenue for sustainable development. The desert's landscapes, cultural heritage, and biodiversity attract visitors seeking unique experiences. Managed responsibly, tourism can provide income for local communities while promoting conservation. However, without proper safeguards, it can damage fragile ecosystems and disrupt traditional ways of life. Water management will be central to the Sahara's future. Underground aquifers, while finite, remain a vital resource. Advances in desalination, water recycling, and efficient irrigation could help meet the needs of growing populations without exhausting reserves. Regional cooperation will be essential, as many water sources cross national borders. The Great Green Wall Initiative, an ambitious project to restore degraded land across the Sahel, represents a bold attempt to counter desertification. By planting trees, improving soil health, and supporting sustainable livelihoods, it aims to create a mosaic of green and productive landscapes along the desert's southern edge. Success will depend on long-term commitment, local engagement, and adaptation to changing conditions. Technology is transforming life in the Sahara. Mobile phones, satellite internet, and renewable energy systems are connecting even remote communities to global networks. These tools can support education, healthcare, and commerce, reducing isolation and opening new possibilities. At the same time, they bring challenges from cultural change to the need for digital literacy. Cultural preservation will be as important as economic development. The Sahara's languages, music, oral histories, and crafts are part of humanity's shared heritage. Protecting them requires investment in education, documentation, and the empowerment of local voices. Development that erodes cultural identity risks losing something as valuable as any natural resource. Scientific research will continue to play a vital role. The Sahara is a natural laboratory for studying climate systems, desert ecology, and human adaptation. Insights gained here can inform global strategies for managing arid lands, conserving biodiversity, and preparing for climate change. International collaboration, data sharing, and capacity building will be key to unlocking this potential. The desert's future will also be shaped by geopolitics. The Sahara spans multiple nations, each with its own priorities, challenges, and opportunities. Cross-border cooperation on trade, infrastructure, and environmental management can turn the desert from a dividing line into a shared asset. Conversely, conflict and instability can undermine progress, making peace and governance as important as technology and investment. For the people who call the Sahara home, the future will be a continuation of a long tradition of adaptation. Nomadic herders, oasis farmers, and desert traders have always adjusted to shifting conditions, whether environmental, economic, or political. Their knowledge of water sources, weather patterns, and sustainable resource use will remain invaluable in navigating the challenges ahead. The Sahara's story is not one of isolation. Its dust fertilizes the Amazon, its winds influence European weather, and its history is woven into the fabric of civilizations across continents. In an interconnected world, the fate of the Sahara is linked to global systems and global responsibility. Outro, closing the journey. Over the course of this series, we have crossed the Sahara in time and space. We have walked through its ancient green past, traced the routes of caravans laden with salt and gold, stood beneath its night skies, and listened to the whispers of its winds. We have met the wildlife that thrives against the odds, explored the art carved into its stones, and followed the migrations that have shaped human history. What emerges from this journey is a portrait of a place that is both fragile and enduring. The Sahara is a land of extremes, but also of balance, between movement and stillness, scarcity and abundance, isolation and connection. It is a reminder that even in the harshest environments, life finds a way, and that adaptation is the key to survival. The challenges ahead are real: climate change, desertification, resource scarcity, and cultural loss. But so are the opportunities: renewable energy, sustainable tourism, scientific discovery, and cultural preservation. The choices made in the coming decades will determine whether the Sahara's future is one of decline or renewal. In the end, the Sahara teaches us that landscapes are never static. They are shaped by wind and water, by the passage of time, and by the actions of those who inhabit them. The desert's story is still being written, in the shifting lines of its dunes, in the resilience of its people, and in the connections it forges across continents. As we leave this journey, the image that remains is not of emptiness, but of possibility. The Sahara is not just a place on a map, it is a living system, a cultural crossroads, and a mirror reflecting our relationship with the planet. Its future, like ours, will be defined by how well we learn to live within our means, respect our environment, and value the diversity of life in all its forms. The sands will continue to move, the winds will continue to blow, and the stars will still shine over the desert night. What we choose to do now will decide what stories those sands will tell to the generations yet to come.